Hi everybody, you're listening to Bookworms. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Steve and my very good friend here today with me is Eunice. Say hello. Oh, hello, we've been turned off. Never mind. I can still see you, Eunice. Say hello to the nice people, Eunice.
Hello, nice people. We're going to read some poems and some interesting books for you today.
That is the plan. So I'll kick off first because I'm bigger than you. So what I've got for you
and
guys
uglier.
today. What's that? Oh, I have one of these tricky Kindle things, so I'm just going to fire up my Kindle. One of the things I wanted to talk about was H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells had a big effect on me as a child. I can remember at the age of 10 when my very good friend Derek's father was an avid reader of science fiction, and he had this wonderful library, and one of the books in it was The Time Machine. And I read that. It took me a week or so to read it, but I absolutely loved it. I reread it a couple of times too. It's just such a fabulous book. And that got me onto reading science fiction. I became an avid science fiction reader. So what I'd like to do with you, just a quick précis about George Wells. He was an English writer, as I say. He was prolific in many genres, writing dozens of novels, short stories, works of social commentary, history, satire, biography and an autobiography, and even included 2 books on recreational war games. So he had a wide range of interests, shall we say. Born in 1866 in Bromley.
Kent.
In Kent. What used to be Kent, it's now London, but that's a whole different story.
Right.
We won't go there. So, born in Bromley, and which was where I grew up.
And my father too.
That's right, I'd forgotten that. Yeah. And I think it's probably just about Bromley's only claim to fame, apart from the fact that I grew up there and Eunice's father used to live there as well. And so H.G. Wells is best remembered for his science fiction and is often called the father of science fiction, along with Jules Verne. So during his own lifetime, he was most prominent as a forward-looking, even prophetic social critic who devoted his literary talents to the development of a progressive vision on a global scale, says Wikipedia. A futurist, he wrote a number of utopian works, and interestingly, at least to me, he foresaw the advent of aircraft, tanks, space travel, nuclear weapons, satellite television, and something resembling the World Wide Web. Fascinating character. So let's get on then. So The Time Machine, which is what I'd like to read an extract from today, was written 120 years ago. So as written 120 years ago, but I think it's still today a riveting read. I have a Kindle, one of these new fangle-dangle electronic thingies, and I use that to house all my collections like Shakespeare and H.G. Wells and Jane Austen, etc. I'll just kick into it. So this is chapter 3, and he has already been on a time travel expedition. He's got a group of people that he's talking to about his experiences. So we'll go straight into the dialogue. It was at 10 o'clock today that the first of all time machines began its career. I gave it a last tap, tried all the screws again, put one more drop of oil on the quartz rod, and sat myself in the saddle. I suppose a suicide who holds a pistol to his skull feels much the same wonder at what will come next as I felt then. I took the starting lever in one hand and the stopping one in the other, pressed the first, and almost immediately the second. I seemed to reel. I felt a nightmare sensation of falling, and looking around I saw the laboratory exactly as before. Had anything happened? For a moment I suspected that my intellect had tricked me. Then I noted the clock. A moment before, as it seemed, it had stood at a minute or so past 10. Now it was nearly 3:30. I drew a breath, set my teeth, gripped the starting lever with both hands and went off with a thud. The laboratory got hazy and went dark. Mrs. Watchett came in and walked, apparently without seeing me, towards the garden door. I suppose it took her a minute or so to traverse the place, but to me she seemed to shoot across the room like a rocket. I pressed the lever over to its extreme position. The night came like the turning out of a lamp, and in another moment came tomorrow. The laboratory grew faint and hazy, then fainter and ever fainter. Tomorrow night came black, and then day again, night again, day again, faster and faster still. An edifying murmur filled my ears, and a strange, dumb confusedness descending on my mind. I'm afraid I cannot convey the peculiar sensation of time travelling. They are excessively unpleasant. There is a feeling exactly like that one has upon a switchback, of a helpless, headlong motion. I felt the same horrible anticipation, too, of an imminent smash. As I put on pace, night followed day like the flapping of a black wing. The dim suggestion of the laboratory seemed presently to fall away from me, and I saw the sun hopping swiftly across the sky, leaping at every minute, and every minute marking a day. I supposed the laboratory had been destroyed, and I had come into the open air. I had a dim impression of scaffolding, but I was already going too fast to be conscious of any moving things. The slowest snail that ever crawled dashed by too fast for me. The twinkling succession of darkness and light was excessively painful to the eye. Then, in the intermittent darknesses, I saw the moon spinning swiftly through her quarters, from new to full, and had a faint glimpse of the circling stars. Presently, as I went on, still gaining velocity, the palpitation of night and day merged into one continuous greyness. The sky took on a wonderful deepness of blue, a splendid luminous colour, like that of early twilight. The jerking sun became a streak of fire, a brilliant arch in space. The moon, a fainter, fluctuating band, and I could see nothing of the stars, save now and then a brighter circle flickering in the blue. The landscape was misty and vague. I was still on the hillside upon which this house now stands, and the shoulder rose above me, grey and dim. I saw trees growing and changing like puffs of vapour. Now brown, now green, they grew, spread, shivered, and passed away. I saw huge buildings rise up, faint and fair, and pass like dreams. The whole surface of the earth seemed changed, melting and flowing under my eyes. The little hands upon the dials that registered my speed raced round faster and faster. Presently I noticed that the sun belt swayed up and down from solstice to solstice in a minute or less, and that consequently my pace was over a year a minute. And minute by minute the white snow flashed across the world and vanished, and was followed by the bright, brief green of spring. The unpleasant sensations of the start were less poignant now. They merged at last into a kind of hysterical exhilaration. I remarked indeed a clumsy swaying of the machine for which I was unable to account. But my mind was too confused to attend to it. So, with a kind of madness growing upon me, I flung myself into futurity. At first I scarce thought of stopping, scarce thought of anything but these new sensations. But presently a fresh series of impressions grew up in my mind, a certain curiosity, and therewith a certain dread, until at last they took complete possession of me. What strange developments of humanity, what wonderful advances upon our rudimentary civilization, I thought, might not appear when I came to look nearly into the dim, elusive world that raced and fluctuated before my eyes. I saw great and splendid architecture rising about me, more massive than any buildings of our own time, and yet, as it seemed, built of glimmer and mist. I saw a richer green flow up the hillside, and remain there without any wintry intermission. Even through the veil of my confusion, the earth seemed very fair, and so my mind came round to the business of stopping. the peculiar risk lay in the possibility of my finding some substance in the space which I or the machine occupied. So long as I travelled at high velocity through time, this scarcely mattered. I was, so to speak, attenuated, was slipping like a vapour through the interstices of intervening substances. That's a tricky one to say after a few drinks. But to come to a stop involved the jamming of myself, molecule by molecule, into whatever lay in my way. Meant bringing my atoms into such intimate contact with those of the obstacle that a profound chemical reaction, possibly a far-reaching explosion, would result and blow myself and my apparatus out of all possible dimensions into the unknown. This possibility had occurred to me again and again while I was making the machine, but then I had cheerfully accepted it as an unavoidable risk. One of the risks a man has got to take. A man, mind you, a man. Now the risk was inevitable. I no longer saw it in the same cheerful light. The fact is that, insensibly, the absolute strangeness of everything, the sickly jarring and swaying of the machine, above all, the feeling of prolonged falling, had absolutely upset my nerve. I told myself that I could never stop, and with a gust of petulance I resolved to stop forthwith. Like an impatient fool, I lugged over the lever, and incontinently the thing went reeling over, and I was flung headlong through the air. There was a sound of a clap of thunder in my ears. I may have been stunned for a moment. A pitiless hail was hissing round me, and I was sitting on soft turf in front of the overset machine. Everything still seemed grey, but presently I remarked that the confusion in my ears was gone. I looked around me. I was on what seemed to be a little lawn in a garden, surrounded by rhododendron bushes, and I noticed that their mauve and purple blossoms were dropping in a shower under the beating of the hailstones. The rebounding, dancing hail hung in a cloud over the machine and drove along the ground like smoke. In a moment I was wet to the skin. "Fine hospitality," said I, "to a man who has travelled innumerable years to see you." Presently I thought what a fool I was to get wet. I stood up and looked round me. A colossal figure, carved apparently in some white stone, loomed indistinctly beyond the rhododendrons, through the hazy downpour. But all else of the world was invisible. My sensations would be hard to describe as the columns of hail grew thinner. I saw the white figure more distinctly. It was very large, for a silver birch tree touched its shoulder. It was of white marble, in shape something like a winged sphinx. But the wings, instead of being carried vertically at the sides, were spread so that it seemed to hover. The pedestal, it appeared to me, was of bronze and was thick with verdigris. It chanced that the face was towards me. The sightless eyes seemed to watch me. There was the faint shadow of a smile on the lips. It was greatly weather-worn, and that imparted an unpleasant suggestion of disease. I stood looking at it for a little space, half a minute perhaps, or half an hour. It seemed to advance and to recede as the hail drove before it denser or thinner. At last I tore my eyes from it for a moment and saw that the hail curtain had worn threadbare, and that the sky was lightening with the promise of the sun. I looked up again at the crouching white shape, and the full temerity of my voyage came suddenly upon me. What might appear when that hazy curtain was altogether withdrawn? What might not have happened to men? What if cruelty had grown into a common passion? What if, in this interval, the race had lost its manliness and had developed into something inhuman, unsympathetic, and overwhelmingly powerful? I might seem some old-world savage animal, only the more dreadful and disgusting for our common likeness, a foul creature to be incontinently slain. I think I'll stop there. So that gives you...
Amazing.
Isn't it fabulous?
Yeah.
I love it. And reading it again brings back all those
astonishing
memories.
To me is his imagination to imagine, because nobody's experienced it, imagine what it would be like to be in a time machine and what effect on the weather and the environment the speed would have.
Right. Well, that was the man, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that was what he was so good at, coming up with these ideas and makes you think. Well, yeah, what would have happened to men? Would they have continued on along this same line?
Yeah.
But I'd say one of the interesting things, and I'll just hand over to you in a second, but one of the interesting things to me, again, because this is, as I say, written 120 years ago, everything is all to do with men, isn't it? You notice that? There's one woman in the whole thing, and she's the caretaker, and she cleans things up and cooks, and everything's about men. It's interesting.
Things
isn't it?
haven't changed very much, have they?
They haven't changed a lot, no. All right, lovely. Well, that's all I wanted to initially, so I'll hand over to you now. Eunice, what have you got for us, dear?
Well, I wanted to read two poems, one by very diverse authors. One is W.H. Auden, and it's the one that everybody knows from Four Weddings and a Funeral, and it's just a lovely poem. So I will read Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone, silence the... Sorry, I'm finding it difficult to see here. Silence the pianos, and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin. Let the mourners come.
Sorry, dear, do you want to go to the other microphone? You've got the
I'll be
light
fine.
right behind you. Okay.
Let airplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows around the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policeman wear black gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday best, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good. I'm sorry that was a bit of a morbid poem, but I thought it's quite beautiful.
Quite a change.
And it's quite a famous one, W.H. Auden.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read my second poem now?
Absolutely.
My second poem is quite the reverse.
You might have. Do you want to come around here, Lovey? Because I don't think the cameras are watching, and the nice people on YTV can't see you.
Shall I come over there?
Pop round here, dear. Be able to see me. So sorry, people. We'll just have a little shift around here.
You want me to sit in your chair?
Yeah. Just sit in the big chair.
Okay.
Here we go. This is the nice people.
I can see myself now.
So you just read that. I'll be back and see.
Oh, I Wish I'd Looked After My Teeth by Pam Ayres, the wonderful Pam Ayres. She was born in 1947, which now makes her 73. And the one I'm wanting to read is, Oh, I Wish I'd Looked After My Teeth, and I'll try and do it in a Pam Ayres accent. Oh, I wish I'd looked after my teeth and spotted the perils beneath. All the toffees I chewed and the sweet sticky food. I wish I'd looked after my teeth. I wish I'd been that much more willing, when I had more tooth there than filling, to give up gobstoppers with respect to me choppers and to buy something else with me shilling. When I think of the lollies I licked and the licorice all sorts I picked, sherbet, dabs, big and little, all that hard peanut brittle, my conscience gets horribly pricked. My mother, she told me no end, if you got a tooth, you got a friend. I was young then and careless. My toothbrush was hairless. I never had much time to spend. Oh, I showed them the toothpaste, all right. I flashed it about late at night. But up and down brushing and poking and fussing didn't seem worth the time. I could bite. If I'd known I was paving the way to cavities, caps and decay, the murder of fillings, injections and drillings, I'd have thrown all my sherbet away. So I lay in the old dentist's chair, and I gaze up his nose in despair, and his drill it to whine in these molars of mine. To amalgam, he'll say, for in there. How I laughed at my mother's false teeth as they foamed in the waters beneath. But now comes the reckoning. For me they are beckoning. Oh, I wish I'd looked after my teeth.
She's delightful, isn't she? I love her writing.
Yeah, lovely Pamers.
Yeah. We're going to have to switch seats again.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause all the nice Wairarapa TV people want to see us.
Okay.
All these lovely radio people can hear us, but the YTV people get this disembodied voice. Lovely. There was a nice switch from the seriousness of Gordon. I've got a lovely book to read.
Dumpty by John Lithgow.
By John Lithgow.
Yeah.
Lithgow. Very, very erudite person, very good actor. I only ever knew him as Third Rock from the Sun, which was absolutely awful, but he is a fabulous actor and a very, very clever man. So he's written Trumpty Dumpty, all about the American president that nobody wants, and the illegal president. We won't go there, but we will read this poem. So it's a book full of lovely satirical verse, and he's written it to various famous songs and in nodding to various poets and so on. So the first one I'd like to read is called Trumpty Dumpty. Trumpty Dumpty wanted a wall to stir up a rabid political brawl. His Republican rivals, both feckless and stodgy, succumbed in the end to his rank demagogy. Dumpty's wall made no earthly sense. A boondoggle built at enormous expense, but he promised in speeches despotic and shrill he'd make certain that Mexico footed the bill. Trumpty Dumpty kept insisting, more and more citizens started resisting. Sadly, there won't be an end to this tale, at least until reasonable people prevail.
Did you write anything else?
Oh, he's got some fabulous things. I have one more that I'd like
You've
to read.
got time.
And this is Trumpty Dumpty Part 3. So there are various other Trumpty Dumptys and a whole bunch of stuff. It's a fabulous book. Trumpty Dumpty wanted more power. Legal constraints made him cranky and sour. Revered institutions and customs could fall as long as he got his preposterous wall. He peevishly called for a government shutdown with wages and services drastically cut down. His folly came off as an unfunny joke when thousands of federal workers went broke. That was the big shutdown of the government, of all the federal workers. The face-off in Congress was not even close. He was handily snookered by Nancy Pelosi. He angrily mounted a counter-insurgency, launching a spurious national emergency. Trumpty Dumpty thus had begun his maniacal trashing of Article 1. He's a rampant gorilla let loose from the zoo. Your chief executive, working for you. And he's got a note. And every one of these poems, he puts a note about it. And in this one he says, the longest US government shutdown in history and the second during the presidency of Donald Trump occurred between December 22nd, 2018 and January 25th, 2019. Nancy Pelosi, elected Speaker of the US House of Representatives after Democrats won control in the 2018 midterms, successfully resisted Donald Trump's attempts to leverage a government shutdown to secure funding for a border wall. And so it goes on. There's some wonderful things there. We've got a few more minutes now, dear. So you've got... Do you have another Pamela's?
No.
Okay. Well, I think that's all. I've got... so, if you ever want to have a riveting read, H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. It's written 120 years ago, but it's a fabulous read, and it was... I can remember it clear as a bell reading that as a kid. Very intense at times, but a prophetic writer. The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. And the other one is that I read was Trumpty Dumpty by John Lithgow. And again, that's so much fun. And your choices today were from...
Stop All the Clocks by W.H. Auden, from a book called As I Walked Out One Evening. It's got a lot of Auden's poems in, and they're all quite wonderful.
Right. And that one, of course, as I was saying to you earlier, I read that at my sister-in-law's funeral. And at my brother's request. So a lot of people read that at funerals.
And the other one is Pam Ayres. I've read recently her autobiography, which is a really, really good read. Alan Wilde loaned it to me. And this is just selected poems. The BBC put it together. Wonderful woman, Pam Ayres.
Yeah, she's great.
She used to be a clerk in a insurance company.
Did she really?
Yeah, and started to write. And she went on a talent program on TV,
right.
With one of her poems, and won it. That's what started her career.
Right.
Yeah.
Now she's an international superstar.
Absolutely.
Right, love you. Well, I think that's probably our lot for today. And we'll let these nice people go. Thank you very much for tuning in. You've been listening to Bookworms. And we broadcast this every 2 weeks, with a repeat in between. So this show will be repeated at the same time next Tuesday, and then we'll have somebody fresh. Thank you, Eunice, for coming along. And,
my pleasure, Steve.
Helping me and reading some fun stuff and some serious stuff. So I hope you enjoyed that, people. Please tune in again next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.